And it's filmed in my hometown where I grew up, in Orange, Massachusetts.
Oh, there you go.
It's so like it's filmed in, like, I can see, oh, that's Main Street, and oh my gosh, that's that bridge that, I've been there. I've spit off that bridge.
Oh, you can't say that when I'm drinking coffee. Welcome to the 42 Podcast, where we discuss life together, looking for answers to life, the universe, and, well, everything else. Here are your hosts, Rob and Lindsay. Well, hey, Lindsay, I haven't seen you for 2 weeks.
I know, good morning.
How you doing?
Good. My dad had hip surgery, so I went down to visit him, which is why I wasn't here last time. And he's doing really good. He's practically doing laps around their apartment, and he's recovering really well, and he says really weird things on Vicodin, and it's fun. He said that he gets really weird dreams, and he dreamt that he woke up and told my mom, I dreamt I was a letter of the alphabet. And she's like, which
Wow.
one? And he said, all of them. It's been amusing.
Yeah, I'll say this. When I had my appendix out, they gave me morphine and then something else I don't remember. And that was like a trippy 3 days being on those painkillers. I'm good. I don't want to go through that kind of stuff again. So, yeah, power to him. Glad he's doing better. And, yeah, the letters of the alphabet.
Yeah, really? That makes sense for him.
Yeah, that's a little weird.
I'm a lot like him as far as reading and devouring books and things. He and I are both high on the nerdy scale as far as, like, book geek, so.
Well, and that's what this episode is. This is us talking about the book we read. But gotta love when there's a but at the beginning of an episode.
Yeah.
I think maybe it's fair for us to talk a little bit because of recording schedules, life, and how everything works. We haven't really talked much since we did that bonus episode of Surprise, I think is what it was titled, about where, well, you stand, where we stand, where the podcast stands. And I think it's fair to have a brief conversation on kind of where things are right now with each of us, where you're at, and where this podcast is at.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, go ahead.
It's been a really busy, eventful couple weeks for me. Just coming to the sudden realization that, I'm not really an atheist. I do actually believe in God. And trying to parcel out exactly what that meant. I'm sort of in this stage where I'm trying to be open as far as Jesus goes. Not there's issues. I have issues, a lot of issues with Christianity and the establishment. But, in general, I'm just searching for what that means for me as far as knowing who Jesus is and what he wants for Christianity. I guess that's what I would like to know. Yeah,
and that's going to be part of our continued exploration with this podcast is, well, what does this mean for you? What are some of those big questions of faith? Because you're not the only one who has those questions. There are lots of people out there who have struggled with this, who ask this, who are asking it quietly, but never ask openly or publicly. And I think that's one of the neat things about where we're at as a podcast is, again, we're asking questions and exploring topics, and we may not always get it right, but we're asking. And I think that's part of the power of what we're doing is let's ask. Let's explore.
I don't think there should be any topics that are off limits as far as Christianity goes. And actually, for a future date, there's this book called Pagan Christianity by Frank Viola. I read it, and it revolutionized, well, that's a strong word. It really, really changed how I perceived church. And I think it would be a really cool thing to read that together at some point and go through the book thematically, because they've got some really interesting things to say about the pagan influence on Christianity, which is exciting for me because that means maybe some stuff that we do isn't necessary and we can kind of peel it away and not do it anymore.
Well, I think that also brings into topic the conversation of the missional church in the early part, mid part of church growth, what it was and how the early part of the church co-opted that's the wrong way to put it, co-opted some of the pagan holidays and then adapted them, and then how there's this middle period of missional work that went from working in the culture and adapting the culture to westernizing the culture, which that would be a fascinating conversation in general. I'm familiar with the book in title and in general premise, but I have never read it. So that would be interesting to do down the road. But it's book recommendation is mine this time.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
But we'll get there. That would be a fascinating conversation in and of itself. But we've also got some other good conversations coming up that we're going to do with exploring faith. And one of the ones that you and I talked a little bit about was end times and revelation.
We're going to talk about that.
I think we need to, because you and I have had different reactions and responses to end time revelation.
Are we talking about the violence?
I text you, part of it, yeah.
Well, then that's cool. I just don't want to argue about, like, when tribulation happens and this and that. Like, I'm not interested.
Well, but I think that's actually a valuable part of what that conversation should be, is what the modern day perceptions are of how the tribulation would be. I mean, you've got that whole book series from the early 2000s.
Yeah, how Tim LaHaye
Left Behind
impacted Christianity.
And Jenkins and LaHaye. Yeah. And the perception that they put in, and, well, how accurate is that? What does Revelations and Daniel say?
Yes, I like this conversation. And in addition to that, all those Christian movies that came out by Cloud 10 Pictures, I think there was 4 or 5 of them, like Revelation, Apocalypse. There was a bunch of them that had nothing to do with the Left Behind series itself. And how I know you said they impacted you really negatively. They impacted me really negatively too, but in a really different way.
And I think that's part of where even that conversation will have to go. Of, I saw those. Those were the 70s and 80s. Days of Thunder, I think is what that series or movie titles were called. And for me, that did have a negative impact. And I think we'll talk more on those impacts and what they did and perceptions, and that'll be a fun and neat, probably couple episodes. Yeah. But we also have someone who, in that surprise episode talking about worship, I threw a bit of a gauntlet down, and someone reached out who we both know we're connected to. We're going to have him on probably in April timeframe, April, May.
So we're going to get
to talk about
gang up on you. Gang up on Rob?
Yeah, it's going to be a bit of a gang up on Rob and my horrible ability to interact with music. But I think that'll even be a fun conversation of what music and worship are, and the value of music and worship, and what true worship is.
And I'm looking forward to asking him some questions too from his perspective, because I definitely have questions about worship and music and what's actually happening,
Yeah, and I'm actually really looking forward to that series of conversations. I think that's going to be more than one episode. That'll probably be about 2. But then he's also helping us with something really neat that's kind of happening in the background, where last week's episode, 2 weeks episodes ago, I even changed our opening spiel a bit and added that, it's no longer a conversation between a Christian and an atheist. Things are changing. And we're looking at kind of what that is for the 42 podcast. And the gentleman who is going to be coming on and talking about worship with us also sent us a new logo that we're going to talk more with him about and probably release at that time. So we're having fun with what this show looks like, our conversations, and where we're going with it. Lots of cool things. I gotta say, this is a neat area of expansion as the show has been going. I mean, we've been doing this about 4 months now, and it's
starting to get interesting.
Yeah, and the last episode you and I did together, the movie gems, a lot of people texted me, oh, wait, you missed this thing, you missed that thing, you forgot to talk about this part of my favorite movie. And then I found out that you have not watched one of my favorite movies that we entirely missed talking about. Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
Yep.
You gotta watch it.
I wasn't allowed to watch it because that girl has big boobs. That's why I couldn't watch it.
I talked a little bit about how we do Disney pin trading when we've gone to Disney.
Yes.
And there are 2 pins every time we go to Disney. 2 pins I always look for. And it is the Mickey Mouse Rebel logo from Star Wars, which is really cool. And the second one is, it's a very specific Jessica Rabbit pin. So those are like the 2 pins, because I love Roger Rabbit and I love Star Wars. And I married a redhead. So, which actually is great, because the episode that came out already, but you haven't heard yet, the conversation is Mel and I, because I don't do well talking to myself.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I convinced her to get on, and that was like a guilty pleasure episode for me, because it was just fun talking with her through some memories and ministry moments.
Nice.
And she's the first true guest we've had on the main episode arc, which was fun for me.
Cool. Good. I can't wait to hear it.
Yeah, it'll be fun. So, but anyway, all right, we've chit-chatted enough.
So I made you read a book, and it was scary and weird and messed up.
Yeah, I was okay with like 99% of what I read. And I guess, to be fair, one of the things we need to address up front is we had 2 different versions of the book.
Yeah.
So go ahead and start with what your version was.
Well, my version was published in 1993, so I think the order of the books is all different. So I was kind of counting on the fact that, well, at least, because I didn't finish the book, to my great shame, I didn't finish it, but I was banking on us having read the first 8 stories, the same 8 stories, which didn't happen. So, oops.
Right, because now the version I had is a later edition, that's the audiobook edition, and they actually wound up breaking that up into 3 volumes, and I only got volume 1 and have finished it. And I want to get volume 2 and volume 3, but I got to wait for my next set of credits.
Yeah, and
to do that.
The order of the books, the order of the stories is different, which is odd. I wonder why they did that. But
I don't know, but there are some overlaps in the stories we've read, and I think it'll just be valuable for us to talk about some of the highlights out of these shorts.
Yep.
And yeah, so the book that we read was Nightmares and Dreamscapes by Stephen King.
Yeah.
And early on in the initial conversations of podcasting, you connected that I have never read Stephen King.
Right.
I never read a single King book until about 6 months ago, and you made me read, and I know this is like the second or third time I've said this, you made me read The Stand.
Yeah.
You are dark, demented, and twisted.
I know. It's such a good book, but then when I remember some of the parts that are in there, I'm like, ooh.
Well, not just some of the parts, but I mean, we're 6 months into a pandemic, and you're like, hey, read this book where everybody dies of a disease.
Yeah, a little thematic, a little too close to home there. But you're okay.
But am I? But it was an incredible book. I mean, I couldn't put it down. I read through it about a week and a half, 2 weeks.
Which is impressive.
And yeah, well, again, it's that audiobook thing. And yeah, I was impressed. After I read that, I've read a few more King since then, and I really enjoy his style. I understand now the level of horror that he brings in, because it's not like the jump scares of the 90s and 2000 teen horror movies.
Yes.
it's this deep-rooted psychological disturbance where you're like, oh.
It's like being in a room with a dead body or something, and it's like extremely, it's already scary, and you're like, you're filled with this sense of dread, and then you see a finger twitch. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of what he does to you, is he'll bring you face to face with something really scary, like Suffer the Children, where you're like, is he crossing this line? Is he really going to do this? Yeah, and then he does it. Or he does it in a way you weren't expecting, like in another story that I want to talk about, Popsy. Scares the crap out of you.
Well, and even when he weaves these supernatural elements in, like in The Stand, I'll go back to that, you know, he has Randall Flagg, who is this very supernatural evil, but also this tangible evil. So it's not like over-the-top supervillain-esque. It's very tangible. And since you brought it up, I think it's probably fair to start with Suffer the Children as the first short that we'll talk about out of Nightmares and Dreamscape. And Lindsay, this was the first short in the audiobook. And I have to say, when I heard this one, I was like, I don't know if I can go through
and feel that every story.
I know. And well, no, actually I was good for most of the other stories, but Suffer the Children really was this hard line for me. And at this point, if you haven't listened to the book or read the book and you don't want spoilers, now's the time to check out. This is the spoiler warning from this point on. We're going to talk about things that are in the stories. That teacher...
You want to give a synopsis?
A teacher goes crazy, 3rd grade teacher, and starts believing that her students are... The description I want to use is like children of the corn.
Like they've been body snatched. Like underneath, they're aliens or monsters or something. They're not really human.
And it never, like, says that. It never verifies that. It never does anything than to say maybe, because at the end of the book, it starts happening again with someone else.
Yeah, and all along, you're not really sure if she is crazy or not.
Right. You know, are the children evil? Is she crazy? And then the ending of it leaves it as, you know, a vague, but this teacher snaps and thinks the only way out, the only way she can do anything is to kill these kids. And she kills a bunch of them. And she's a teacher. She does it at school. Which, I mean, we live in an age of... I mean, you and I grew up into that age and then have had children in this age of school shootings, which just is a little... You know, King wrote this back in like the 70s or 80s, this one.
Yeah.
And it was just a little too...
On the nose.
Yeah. Okay, these are tangible things that we deal with today. Of the stresses that make people snap, that make students snap, that have these new situations of school shootings. And so reading that, I was really... I was uncomfortable. I was disturbed. I walked out of that story just going,
Yeah. And I think that's one of his more intense ones. The ones that have to do with kids. And every time you come to it, you're like, well, this is a kid. Nothing's going to happen. Nothing too bad's going to happen. You just forget. It's like he lulls you because the characters are so well written and he goes into so much detail. You're like, well, we've really gotten to know this character so well, and I really like this character now. And then he pulls the rug out from under you.
Yeah, and I mean, he doesn't allow you to sit in comfort for long. And he runs you on that line of, okay, it could go horribly wrong, and you're always hoping it's not horribly wrong, that they'll veer away from that cliff. They'll not take that huge horrible step.
Somebody will save the day. Yeah.
Right. And that's what I kept feeling in that story, was like, come on, somebody.
Yeah.
And I have to say, even the bit of the ending of it, I was incredibly unsatisfied, where, you know, part of the ending is the teacher isn't put on trial. She's put into a mental institute and is kind of rehabilitated, but then it goes dark again at the end, and she starts seeing these kids in a new way again, and kills herself. And that even disturbed me, because I was like, as a father, okay, if you're not going to put that teacher on trial, I'm going to finish this teacher.
Yeah.
I'm going to demand, because, just as a father speaking towards the love I have for my kids, yeah, that was a messed up short story.
It was.
But I think that's also a good segue a bit into what was my favorite, because I enjoyed it way too much. I really did. Like, I relished this short, and it was Dolan's Cadillac.
Yes.
What did you feel with Dolan's Cadillac?
Oh, satisfaction that he actually pulled it off.
Yeah, not just satisfaction, but I mean, it was like a feast for me, is the only way I can describe it, where I relished
vengeance,
the build-up.
Yeah.
Yes, I relished the build-up. I relished the intricate planning, the preparation,
Yep.
I sat with this one, and Dolan's Cadillac is great because, I mean, well, not great, but the original premise being this guy's wife has been killed by this kind of Vegas-era mob boss, and he spends the next decade of his life slowly planning and hunting and meticulously finding a way to take his vengeance. And when he does, the sweet relief of how he does it is just incredible.
The patience. It's amazing.
The patience. But then you get to that cumulative point. He's got the Cadillac in the trap he's set. Yep. He's finally talking to Dolan, who knows who has finally caught him. And he relishes these moments of sweet victory almost. And they're subtle, and they're, yeah. I mean, the one of the powerful moments for me was kind of, he's got Dolan's Cadillac in that hole. Dolan has shot through the roof trying to get him, and then Dolan's one henchman is in the front seat, and his legs are broken, and he keeps crying out and suffering.
Sure, yeah.
And Dolan shoots the guy to shut him up and put him out of his misery. But after he shoots him, I can't remember the main character's name. He goes, "Oh, you didn't save any bullets for yourself?" And just as kind of, as he starts slowly shoveling dirt on top of the Cadillac as Dolan's trapped in it. I entirely enjoyed that. Uncomfortably enjoyed that. Way too much. Like, I walked away from that book, I'm like, that was a very uncomfortable mirror looking into my own soul. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, because I mean, there is that aspect. Is it fair to say there's an aspect of kind of revenge that we all play out in our heads? If I could, I would.
Yeah.
For slights.
That's where vigilantism comes from, and superheroes, and living vicariously through those people that, well, the justice system isn't doing what it's supposed to do, hasn't brought justice to my family or my whoever. So, and you root for these people because we crave justice.
Yeah, and I mean, that was it was well done. It was incredible, and it played into that aspect, and it was an uncomfortable mirror into that side of my psyche, and I possibly everyone's psyche in some small way of, yeah, okay. if I had the patience and the opportunity and that tragedy, how far would I go?
Yeah. Where would you stop?
That's a really good question. I never thought of that. Where would you stop?
Yeah. Would you stop at
You know,
slowly filling the car in, or would you end it a different way?
but even going back, I mean, you got to think, where would you stop? Because he starts stalking him, and what does that entail? How does he learn Dolan's habits? You know, do you stop there and finally say, no, I'm not going down a good road? But it's that slow escalation of, well, I've gone this far, I can go a little further. On this far, I can go just a bit further. And it ends in that cumulative moment of revenge, of him slowly shoveling dirt and trapping Dolan in this hole in the ground to be buried alive. And even then, afterwards, he goes back and he relishes that spot of highway he buried him in.
I know.
And it's just, oh, that was uncomfortably incredible.
That was a good story.
All right, so you read one that you wanted to talk about that I didn't get a chance to read because it wasn't in volume 1.
Yeah. Well, you've said this too. Like, as a father, stuff for the children really bothered you, and me too, for sure. The stories with kids, they just get under my skin. So there's this story called Popsy, and it's told from the perspective of a pedophile, of a sex trafficker. So, and because it opens that way, you think, oh no, come on, I don't want to read this. Where is this going? I don't want to read something So, he's working for this guy. He's trying to kidnap kids for this guy, and he's like, this is his third or fourth kid, so he's starting not to feel so bad. And he ends up talking this kid into coming into his van, and he gets into the van, and his kid's like, Popsy's gonna be so mad at you. Popsy's gonna find you, or, you know, he had gone to get something to eat for him. So they're driving. It turns out that Popsy is a vampire.
Oh.
So the justice is swift, and it's not even a long one. Like, they're going off this deserted road, and all of a sudden there's like something on top of the van, and he drags him out. And he had been trying to find a victim for the kid. He was trying to teach the kid how to be a predator. So the irony of the predator is now the prey, and the fact that the kid is being taught the ways of the predator. I just liked the circle. And he didn't get into too much detail, so as far as the other kids go, but I thought that was a really clever. I didn't see it coming. I think that's what I like about it too, is a lot of his stories, it's so fun because you don't know where he's going. You have no idea what's going to happen, and nothing is sacred to him. So anything could happen, which is, I think, what makes his stories so exciting.
Well, but it's also interesting how he pulls from kind of that collective psyche of horror. Because Popsy, I haven't read it. I'll have to read it. Popsy and what you're describing, I mean, that ties into Dracula very, very overtly. I mean, vampires directly connects into that story of Dracula. But that idea even of youth corrupted is in the original Dracula books. And I mean, there's that element of disturbance of that idea of youth corrupted, youth twisted in a way that is not good in any manner. And that's a collective piece of horror for everyone, as parents, as society, as
exactly.
Because we look at youth and hold them as the hope for the next generation. So it's taking that hope and adding a dark twist.
Did you read Salem's Lot, this last couple books? I mean, it's not a short story in this book, but it's a novel about vampires. Did you?
No, I have not.
Well, something that I think is really interesting that has done is there seems to be this underlying theme of everything seems okay, but underneath, people are really evil. And in Salem's Lot, it's almost like the vampires are bad, but the people are just as bad. The people are just as messed up, and I like that his commentary on society and what people are really like, and what's good old small town wherever, some small tiny Maine town, how it's so nice and ideal and Leave It to Beaver, but no, actually it's disgusting what lurks beneath.
Well, that even ties into the idea of Americana. I mean, the white picket fence, 2.5 children, and the American dream that we hold as an ideal, but now he's twisted and corrupted even that, and what do you do with that? This is the hope, but now the hope has this very dark stain going through it.
Yeah.
And I do have to admit, I mean, that is one of the things I have seen with his writing that he really is masterful at. He plays with and introduces hope that you just want to trust.
Yeah, good. Yeah, that's really insightful.
You want to be okay with everything that's about to happen.
Yeah.
But if you've read King, you know you're not.
Yeah.
You know at no point are you safe in this book or in this story.
Yeah.
The House on Maple Street was one of the shorts that was in what I read. And that one was even fascinating for how there's kind of this very subtle underlying issue that you see in this family structure. And that's that it's a blended family. It's mom and this weird guy, I don't remember the weird guy's name, who is now married into the family, his stepdad, but something's happening in the house and it's slowly transitioning and seeping through the house. And, the kids are trying to figure out what it is, what's going on. Mom seems to be oblivious. Yeah, kind of, except the house is slowly turning into a spaceship.
Oh. Cool.
Which, I'm sitting there reading this, and I'm going, okay, wait a minute. Am I in sci-fi? Am I in horror?
Yeah.
This isn't quite sci-fi. Horror? Where am I?
Yeah.
In literature, I'm in Kingisms.
You're in Kingland.
That's
yeah.
Yeah, Kingland, Kingisms, whatever you want to call it. Because, is stepdad the one who's the alien? Because he's not exactly right, but he's not not right. And so all of this plays out. In the end, the kids wind up launching the house into space with stepdad in it, screaming as the house flies up into space as it's been slowly transforming.
That sounds just like a Ray Bradbury story or something, doesn't it?
Oh, we should read some Ray Bradbury.
Yeah, that sounds just like him. And actually, he was influenced by Bradbury, so...
He was influenced by several authors, and one of the neat ones that, because I've been reading some recently of Lovecraft, I think it was Crouch End, which in the audiobook I had was read by Tim Curry, and it was very Lovecraftian.
Yeah. Like
post the rise of Cthulhu and the old gods. And that was just a fun one because it was tying into this piece of literature that I'm trying to now read, and how that plays out, what that looks like, and into this influence of King's that you see in more subtle ways, but now he's doing the influential, or pulling on that influence directly, which also was neat because another one that was pulled from a classic author was, I'm going to mispronounce this, Umney's Last Case. Did you read that one?
Not this go around, but it sounds familiar.
Okay, it's this LA detective set in the noir time period, that classic black and white kind of detective story.
Mm-hmm.
But it has this kind of Sherlock Holmesian twist to it, but what if the author could take the place of the character?
Oh, yeah, that's classic King.
Yeah, and then the character is now put into the real world, and the end of it is the character is finding out his way to get back into the story, removing the author out of it. It was neat. You could see these tie-ins to Holmes and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's influences in King's writings. That and I forgot what the other one I just mentioned was, Crouch End, were neat kind of homages to big influence in how King writes with Lovecraft and Conan Doyle.
Yeah. I think it's also interesting that he's done that. The characters are sort of coming out of the book and wreaking destruction. He's done that a couple times. I wish I could remember the one I'm thinking about, but the character's name is Stark, something Stark. He's
Tony Stark? Oh wait, no.
I think it's George or something, but yeah, it's a really scary story about this author who's trying to retire a character. He tries to kill off his main character, who's sort of an anti-hero. Like, he's not a good guy, but he's the good guy. And he tries to kill him off, and it doesn't work. Like, he actually materializes in the real world, like coming out of a grave. And it's like the line between fiction. It's actually confusing. Like, in the book, the line between fiction and reality is really thin, and it's a really good story. I can't remember it. There's crows on the cover usually.
If you remember it, let me know, because that does sound interesting. Can I take a rabbit trail?
Yeah.
Like a very big rabbit trail?
I'm intrigued.
Have you ever watched, I would be surprised if you haven't, but have you ever watched any of the MCU movies?
Yeah, I've watched a bunch of them. Yep.
Okay. And I'm taking this rabbit trail because you said Stark, and it put my head into that. I'm going to propose something, and it's an unpopular opinion.
Yes.
I've already had a couple fights with students on this, but I think within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, within the, Avengers Endgame and the first Iron Man movie, I think there's an argument to be made that Tony Stark is a bad guy.
I've never liked Tony Stark, but I mean, that's kind of his character arc anyway, so I'd be cool. I wouldn't fight with you over that, because I think he's bleepity bleep. I just don't like him at all.
I think he is an unintentional bad guy of the MCU story arc. So, if you're listening to this and you want to fight me on it, well, text us. Maybe we'll have you in for an episode, and you can fight me and Lindsay indirectly, I guess, on how Tony Stark is not a bad guy, and try to prove me wrong, because I think I've got a good case here. But all right, rabbit trail side. I guess there is a discussion to be had on, and maybe this will be a later time, but even Stephen King books that have been adapted into movies and other media, because there's a lot out there.
Yeah.
Like, there are movies that I watch and love, and I never realized that King had a hand in them.
Yeah.
Until, again, you put me onto this trail of getting into him, of reading some more of his stuff. And, okay, wow, I didn't know he had a hand in different things that I've enjoyed.
Yeah.
So that'll have to be a discussion down the road, possibly. Yep. All right, since you threw it down, I have to pick it up. I love J.J. Abrams. If his name is attached to something, if Bad Robot is attached to something, he has crossed over, and he did the reboot of Star Trek.
And I liked that. I'm not a Trek fan, but I liked those movies.
He did really good with those reboots. But then he also did the starting of the last story arc, the last trilogy of Star Wars, the Skywalker saga. Say what you will, and maybe we'll have to get a few Star Wars geeks in at some point, and we can all fight over what this last trilogy has been. But I don't exactly hate that story arc. I'm not fans of some of the things they did, but I don't hate it. But I really do like his movies, his TV. I have not finished Lost, though. That is the one, like, J.J. Abrams thing that I haven't been able to finish. I liked Lost, but I never finished it because, first of all, I didn't want to be disappointed in the ending because I've heard a lot of people complain about it, so I didn't want to finish it. I liked the characters a lot. I think he did a really good job with the characters, and that's the best part of it. But yeah, he's a really good writer. He's good. So the absolute one of favorite J.J. Abrams moments I have is, did you ever watch Cloverfield?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do you remember how they did the trailers for it?
No. Oh,
Okay.
yeah, I do. I've seen the trailers like in the last year, so just refresh my memory.
All right, so I don't remember what movie I went to see. That's how powerful the trailer was. But it was, I think I was dating Melinda at that time, and I had like an hour or two to kill between her getting off of work or something. I don't remember what it was. So I went and watched a movie. And while I was there, it was the first time I saw a Cloverfield trailer, and J.J. Abrams did Cloverfield. And they played out a bunch of these scenes, and they said nothing about what the name of the movie was, no rating, no information other than a date.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah. Yep.
And I walked out of that theater mad because it's, what is this movie? It looks amazing. I want to know what the name of it is. I want to know who's behind it, what is going on. And that started a viral campaign because the internet lit up of, okay, wait a minute, what is this movie?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that sparked the interest. And J.J. Abrams plays on those tensions well. And I think that's, that's fair to even say and look at if he's part of Castle Rock and part of that Kingisms, that plays back and forth well, because you have these build-up of tensions. You have this build-up of story arc that just makes you go, what is going on?
Yeah. Where is he going with this? So the woman in Cloverfield who plays Marlena Diamond, she's got curly hair. She's kind of the love interest, sort of, kind of gothic, I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, her name's Lizzie Kaplan, and she's in Castle Rock, and she's so good. But before you watch Castle Rock, you're gonna want to read Misery first.
Read Misery.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's filmed in my hometown where I grew up, in Orange, Massachusetts.
Oh, there you go.
It's so like it's filmed in, like, I can see, oh, that's Main Street, and oh my gosh, that's that bridge that, I've been there. I've spit off that bridge.
Oh, you can't say that when I'm drinking coffee. I'm gonna snort it.
So it's a fun show, even just for that reason for me, because it's filmed there. So pretty cool.
Hey, awesome.
Yeah.
So I really did enjoy this book recommendation. I'm beginning to enjoy King. I'm disturbed by him, but he writes in such a way that you keep coming back.
That's why you love him, kind of.
Yeah. So this was a fun book. This was a fun series of short stories. I am going to finish Volume 2 and Volume 3 as I get credits to get those audiobooks.
Mm-hmm.
But I enjoyed it. This has been fun. I think it's also fair to kind of transition and say it's my turn.
Absolutely. What do you think? What are you thinking?
I'm thinking, just because I like doing goofy stuff, like, not goofy stuff. So originally I had given you a recommendation of a show to watch. Do you remember the show? This was a while ago.
Nope.
Okay. I gave you the recommendation of watching The Expanse on Amazon Prime.
Fun. Okay. Yep.
Really good show. Really enjoy it. It's a fun sci-fi. And they have a whole book series, and I was thinking we should do the first book in that book series. Yeah, no. We're not going to do that.
We're not?
No. I changed my mind.
That was a weird lead-in. Okay.
I know. But I like doing that, where you're like, oh, okay, this sounds good. No, what are we doing? For kicks and giggles,
Mm-hmm.
I decided we're going to do something I read, I think it was like a decade ago. Might have been less than that, but it's just a fun kind of alt history book.
Ooh.
And it's a trilogy. So we're going to read the first one, and I recommend, read the first one, read the second one, read the third one, because it finishes well. And it is a young adult book, so it's following late teens, early young adults, as they are living and experiencing World War I. Okay? But where it gets really fun is it's a different kind of World War One, where you have, I haven't read it for a while, so I might butcher this, but it's the Darwinists and the Mechanists. So you have England and all of her allies who are Darwinists. They have developed their fighting machines and their culture around genetically modifying animals to suit their needs.
Yeah.
So, like, World War one of the big things was airships. Well, the airships in this book are actually genetically modified like whales that fly through the air.
Interesting.
Okay? But then you have the other side, which is Germany and all of her allies, and they've built their whole society around a mechanical steampunk society.
Huh.
So now you have, early versions of tanks and walkers, and they're now fighting against the Darwinists, and it's this neat kind of alternate history and development of steampunkism, really.
Cool. What is it?
It's called Leviathan.
I've heard of this book, actually. I've heard of it.
Yeah, it's Leviathan by Scott Westerfield. Feld. Sorry. And it's just this neat, fun little diverging story of World War One that involves improbable differences, but follows the arc of these characters and how they navigate World War One, kind of what the different areas of these allies and enemies are, and it was really enjoyable. It was just kind of a fun read. I haven't read it for a while, which is why I'm going, hey, this would be...
Yeah.
It's just a fun divergence of old history that can even bring us into discussions of what World War One was, some of the repercussions, and yeah.
Sounds fun. That sounds like a great recommendation. Honestly, it sounds like a better recommendation than mine. You actually thought about it. Cool. I'm excited. I love books, man. I love books. When I walk into a bookstore, it's like sacred space. Like, that's how I feel. I love books. So I'm excited.
When I go into a bookstore, my wallet starts crying.
Yeah, mine too. Mine too.
So, Mel occasionally has to go in for residencies for her degree, and she'll have these residency times, and the kids kind of love it, because what that occasionally means is we'll go down to the big town just south of us, and we'll spend the evening, we'll go and we'll hit Chick-fil-A up, and then after Chick-fil-A, the kids don't want to go to goofy, Vills or any of that stuff. They want to go to Barnes and Nobles. They want to go and they want to search books. They want to get their next series to read. And that's been one of the neat things that we've done.
That's great.
Me and the kids. Of, Mel will be in class and the kids and I are in the bookstore. And it's great. I love encouraging my kids to read. I love... I just introduced my son to the Hardy Boys series.
Yeah.
So he just started reading that. My daughter just started reading Nancy Drew, but my son went through and he started reading classics. So he and I had a conversation on the Hunchback of Notre Dame. And
oh, yeah.
One of my favorites, 20,000 Leagues
Under the Sea. I loved that book.
I love Jules Verne. H.G. Wells and Jules Verne, they're like my childhood author heroes. Because of what they introduced, what they dreamed of.
Yeah.
Which is really an interesting thing to say, of what they dreamed of for society and how they spoke to navigating some of the cultural issues of that time, even, that we're still dealing with today.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Just an aside for the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, that's one of the examples, very few examples of a setting becoming the book. Like, I want to be in the Nautilus. I want to live there. I loved the Nautilus. I loved him describing it. I loved the setup. I loved everything about it. And the characters and what happened were almost secondary to the dream of the Nautilus.
So, when you think of the Nautilus, what do you think of?
I think, kind of like you said, a little steampunk, but at the same time, like, it's got this museum-y, library feel. I think a little bit of like the moon pool and the abyss. You remember the moon pool?
Oh,
I have that like
yes.
image, that light coming in, and
I always think of Disney's classic version of the Nautilus.
yeah.
The one that they made into a ride, the one that was in the movies. And I mean that's what's stuck in my head. It's not perfectly the description that Vern gives, but that's what is ingrained in me in thinking of the Nautilus.
Yeah.
It's just that kind of classic era, but also it looks deadly.
Yeah.
It looks dangerous. It's fascinating. You want to be there, but it's dangerous. But yeah, so stories are great. They're great in how and what and they enable for us as a society to explore, to talk about, to feel uncomfortable with, and
yeah, it's magic. It's magical.
it is its own version of magic. Yes, it really is.
I love it.
So, I think Leviathan will be a fun conversation as well. If you do want, and this is kind of why I bounced into this category. If you do want to read, and I recommend it because I have read it and it's really good, but The Expanse is based on the book series by, can't remember his name, but the first book is actually called Leviathan Awakes.
Oh, really? That's the book I've seen,
Yeah.
and not the Scott Westerfield book. I've seen Leviathan Awake.
And that's the one that's based on The Expanse. Or The Expanse is based on. There we go.
And it's different author?
Different author. It's, give me a second, I can pull it up. It's in my library.
Okay. I love good sci-fi, especially if it's character driven. I like the tech too, but it's second to good character for me.
This is good character and good device, because you have Star Wars sci-fi where they're like, oh, we need to go that way, and all physics rules are bent.
Yeah. Yep. My husband's really upset about that too.
Yeah. But that's not what the Expanse or Leviathan Awakes is. They follow physics. They follow how these things would play out.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a neat one that I'm reading as well. But we're going to talk about Leviathan by Scott Westerfield.
Okay. Gotcha.
So, which is just a neat little young adult alt history diversion. So,
good.
It won't give me nightmares.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. I'm happy. Are you
Cool.
happy?
I guess so.
Yeah.
Not that we've had any major fights, but are we still friends?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's a little easier to ask you if we're still friends than asking my wife at the end of a podcast, are we still married? She loves me and puts up with a lot.
Well, thank you for this conversation, and I will bid you adieu.
And hey, thank you for the book recommendation. It was disturbing, but it was disturbing in a way that allows for reflection when you sit with it. So.
Well, you're welcome.
So, all right. Well, we'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Thank you for listening to the 42 podcast. Please take a moment to like and subscribe. And if you want to join in on the conversation, you can find us on Facebook and Twitter to add your voice to the conversation. Thank you.